Content warning. This episode discusses domestic violence. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is your sister and friend Adar, and you're listening to the Digital Sisterhood podcast. Last week, AJ shared her journey in becoming a Muslim and then journeying off to live in Saudi, and then falling into this incredible opportunity to translate incredible Arabic books into English for others to access, one of them being the Quran. But in the end of the podcast is a part I want you to remember. AJ so powerfully proclaimed.
We look up to somebody like, oh, I can't reach that level. And I would just think, people, you don't know me. You don't know what hardships I've gone through. You don't know the trials that I've gone through. You don't know anything about me. You only know that I participated in this project. And that does not define me as a person or as a Muslim.
And this had me thinking, right? What did she mean? But before we deep dive into that a little later, let's take it back a little into a more exciting time in AJ's story. Now, when Brother Suleiman decided to close down the bookstore for good, AJ just couldn't let that happen. I mean, all those books that were just laying there collecting dust with no access for people to, get knowledge from, it just was out of the question for AJ. Truth is, when AJ mustered up the courage to ask him to inquire about his bookstore, I'm not sure if she believed he'd say yes to her, because he had turned down so many people.
And I approached him and I just said, listen, Suleiman, you've known me for all of these years. I don't have the money to buy this company. I had only $8,000 to my name. That was my life savings at the time. I said, I'll give you that. And then over time, I will inshallah pay you off, right? What do you think? And so we came to an agreement. When my nationality came, I applied because you know that everything there, you have to have permission to publish, right? And so I was able to eventually secure that, and I reopened the bookstore.
Buying the bookstore from Brother Suleiman was the easiest part of AJ's story. When AJ inquired about the bookstore, right away she approached the manager of the building and made a deal to renovate the bookstore. She said to the building owner that she'd remodel everything in exchange for a guarantee not to raise the rent for 5 years. Alhamdulillah, the owner agreed.
So now I have 2 contracts, right, that I'm set in. And we go to the Chamber of Commerce in Jeddah. We hand in the paperwork, the contract, the agreement. So we think everything's on the go-ahead. Nobody informed me that even though everything had gone through legally in Jeddah, that there was a final step of having to be approved by a ministry in Riyadh. And when my paperwork got to Riyadh, they rejected it.
Oh, no.
And there was only 2 people in the country higher than the person that rejected it. Now, you know that in Islam, and this was a shocker. I had already signed these contracts. I already had people working in the store to start the remodeling, create the bookshelves, the counter, custom build, all this stuff, right? So I can't just back out of these things. Now, we're talking about high officials. Here's me. I don't know anybody. How am I, there's no way for me to get to these high officials and try to fight this, right? But I was so distraught. And I happened to be out to lunch with a very close-knit, group of my friends. And I guess I was probably just in one of those moments like, oh my God, what have I done? What am I going to do? I was just venting. And one of my friends, who was also a foreigner, said, well, who is it? Who are these 2 people? And I said, well, it's either Minister so-and-so or the king.
So don't leave 2 people.
We're just going to go knock on their door. And one of my friends said, well, she happened to know somebody who knew that minister. And I'm like, what?
What?
Yeah.
SubhanAllah.
Eventually what happened is I was standing in my store, still thinking that I got to keep processing. I got to find a way to make this work. And really putting trust in Allah. Maybe I was stupid, but I didn't know what else to do. I couldn't just stop. I owed these people all this money, and I'm in these contracts, right? So my friend had called me one day and said, have you heard anything from anyone? And I said, no. And she said, well, I can't make any promises. I'm not real close to these people, but I'll make one more attempt. And so I'm standing in the space. It's very echoey because there's nothing in there. And I get this phone call, and this guy says to me, Amatullah Bentley? I said, yes. He said, wait for me. And I said, and then he put me on hold, and I'm like, what? I'm like, how rude. Who is this? What do they want? I was agitated.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, another man comes on the phone, and he said, Amatullah Bentley, yes. I'm Minister so-and-so. I hear you have a problem.
Oh, Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. Wow.
And so, first of all, there is a proper way in Arabic to address a minister, which, my Arabic, if I heard it, I know what's being said, but I couldn't pull that out of my vocabulary at the moment. And so, being the Westerner that I am, like we would address Mr. President. So I just said, "Oh, hello, Mr. Minister, how are you?" And he probably just thought, "Oh my God, who is this woman?" But to make a long story short, he agreed to look into the case, see what had happened. And, I finally got the approval. Oh. But even after you get the approval, you still have to be cleared through a background check, really. And so we were stuck with that. Subhanallah. There was a customer who used to come to the old bookstore who hadn't been there for years. Mm. He happened to come to the bookstore thinking it was still open. At that precise moment, my worker had been in the warehouse behind where there's no windows, counting inventory and doing different things, but it happened to be a van. So he went into the main store where there's windows that's completely empty at this time to go make wudu. And when he did, he saw somebody approaching the store, this other guy, right? And so he recognized him as a former customer and went out and greeted him. And the customer was like, what's going on here? And he said, oh, well, Suleiman closed and Sister Amatullah took over. And, she doesn't have the permission yet to open. So we're waiting, yada, yada, yada. And he says, well, what's the problem? Now, unbeknownst to us, this man also worked for someone in the department that we needed to be cleared for the background check.
Allahu Akbar. No. This is Allah. Absolutely, positively the most randomest thing. But he could, wow, I'm speechless. I don't even know what to say.
What do you think I was? So Abedin has this man call me and ask me, what's the problem? And literally within days, permission was granted.
Allahu Akbar.
So if you don't consider those miracles,
no, those are miracles.
This is Allah's intervention.
No. That is divine intervention.
This was Allah's project.
Mm-mm. This is all. You were just merely a vehicle. You were just a means. You're just on this ride. But alhamdulillah, Allah chose you as a vehicle. To make the things happen, because when Allah uses you for khair, it's a good thing. It's a very, very good thing. But that is unbelievable. That's actually unbelievable. So when you heard about this conversation, you were just like jaw dropped. You're like, what?
Absolutely. And that's why I always said this is not our project. This is Allah's project.
I relate to that very deeply. I feel that way about this podcast, because we started this in our bedroom, and then 1 year later and a half, 10 million listeners. I don't know how. I don't know how that. I don't know. Like, if you ask Muna, she's right there. We can't tell you how this happened, but all we know is that, like, this is Allah's project. This is what Allah wants.
Right.
And our biggest concern is not messing it up. You know what I mean? Like, our biggest concern is being the best vehicle we could be. And so I relate to what you're saying so deeply. Wow. Sorry. I got to soak that in for a second. For 10 years, AJ was running her bookstore, okay? Still translating, reading, adding bookstore to her bookstore collection. I mean, AJ was living essentially her best life, okay? Until one day, her child needed immediate medical attention. And what was supposed to be a temporary trip to the U.S. unfortunately became a permanent one.
I remember getting into the van and looking back at the door, and I had this gut feeling that I would never walk back in it. I thought, okay, it's good to bring the kids back now because, my daughter was a junior. And I thought, okay, she can do junior and her senior year. That means we'd be residents. So when it came time to college, transition to college, it would make it easier. But after I got here, nothing went as planned. I had said to my sister and her husband, we're coming back. We plan to just stay with you guys for a couple weeks. I'll get a job. I'll move out. We just appreciate a little transition time. That transition lasted 9 months. Although this was my home country, this was my home city, this is everything I was familiar with, I couldn't find a livable wage job. Here I am in my early 50s, and I've had all this experience running my own businesses, but I ended up later going to a career counselor who told me, no matter how much you've done, it was your businesses, and there's no one for them to ask, what kind of employee is she? Also, because I had only done an AA in school, which is, if I look back in life, probably one of my biggest regrets. I remember thinking at the time when I went to college that I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to own a business. So I said, why go to a 4-year college and learn philosophy and French and all these subjects that I thought were kind of unnecessary when what I want to do is business? So I went to business school and got my degree in business and thought, boom, I'm going to get my business started at 20, right? So when I came back, it looks like here's a 50-year-old woman with an AA, and what does she have to show for it? I thought I had a lot to show. I thought my experience would show my capabilities, but the reality turned out to be is that they look at your degrees before anything else. And they have a lot of automated systems now that read the resumes. So I probably just came up as a red flag. So I started applying at places like Target and, Metro Mobility and places like this, but nothing was even $15 an hour. And here I am going, I have to provide for 2 kids and myself on $15 an hour. That's not even a livable wage for a single parent, right? I mean, I was still technically married, but part of the agreement was that if I was going to stay behind in America for a while, that I was going to have to start working to pitch in. I got to the point where I said, all right, I'm just going to apply. So I'm thinking $18, $19, $20 an hour is the minimum. But I had to bring that standard down to $15. And I applied anywhere I put in over 100 resumes and only got a couple interviews.
What was AJ supposed to do? I mean, can you imagine how demoralizing that must have been for her to start from the bottom at her age with all that work experience, but nothing counted? Imagine having to start from scratch with children who need you too. I remember when I came across AJ's LinkedIn, when I was first looking for her, I saw that she had worked at a mail handling place, which meant that, she worked at a physically demanding factory job. And if I'm being honest, I just couldn't believe my eyes. I honestly couldn't believe what I was reading, because I kept thinking, how did a person who owned this incredible bookstore, translated so many classical books for us to read and contributed to the Ummah in such a large way, be the same person essentially struggling, working at a factory job? I just could not put 2 and 2 together. At the time, AJ was very, very fortunate enough to have a sister that helped her during that transition period back in February 2017. Although AJ was in complete survival mode and was completely focused on staying afloat, AJ struggled, man. She really, really struggled.
I wasn't at the post office that long. It was from 3 in the afternoon till 1 in the morning. So this was not convenient at all because my kids were coming home from school then. Very tiring, to work that night shift. You come home, it's like you don't even want to sleep before Fajr because if you go to sleep now, you're so tired, you're not going to hear the alarm. And just the way that it worked when you went in there, if you were a mail handler assistant, you had to wait for somebody to be retired or leave before you could start moving up into the permanent positions. And there's not a lot of turnover. So you don't get the full benefits working as an assistant. They kind of limit you to 30 some hours, and so that you don't get all this vacation time, you don't get the full medical, blah, blah, blah. So it wasn't ideal. And one of my coworkers left and went to a large corporation that, produces food. And he's like, you're never going to get anywhere. Why don't you come out here? The pay's better. And I said, you think I'm going to drive 27 miles one way every day to get out there? He said, just come out and check it out. I think you'll be happy just because the income is good. The benefits are good. Well, they have to make them good because nobody would do those jobs otherwise. The factory work is, I never imagined myself again at that age, but you do what you got to do.
So out of curiosity, like, what was the factory work? What was it like? Describe us, like, what is it like clocking in?
So I was on a food production line, and I started out doing where like the wrapping of the products was. But that's not the only thing you do. They close down the whole plant once a month, and you do a ceiling to floor clean. So you're up there you use the scissor lifts, and you're up there with brushes, shaking off all the flour from the pipes. Yeah, so they have janitors for the everyday stuff like cleaning the bathrooms, but for cleaning the factory, you take the ovens apart, you take the freezers, you defrost the big freezers. It is hard, physical, very labor intensive work. Your feet hurt, your back hurt, it wasn't a lot of fun. And I remember one time in Ramadan, because you're on your line, the breaks really have to be very coordinated. And there were times in Ramadan that they would schedule my break at 1 a.m. And let's say fasting didn't start until 5, but I would literally have to start my fast at 1 a.m. because I could not get to the cafeteria. Of course, there's no food and drink on the line. So
you basically were fasting since 1, even though you're supposed to start at 5, fast at 5.
Yeah.
So you weren't eating. Oh my goodness, that's really harsh. I mean, you'd be fasting for a really long time.
Yeah. There were other times where they'd take my break, because they'd rotate people, but I didn't have a choice in the matter. There's not a lot of people who can cover you because you have to be trained on each section of the line. So you got the mixers at the beginning of the line, and then you got the people on the ovens, and you got the people doing the wrapping, end of the line, right? So I wasn't trained on all aspects of the line, but some other people were, and so they would come and cover you, the people that had been there for a long time. But it had to go according to everybody's break, so it was exhausting. And then when I first started, it was 8-hour shifts, right? And then after I was there for a while, the employees actually voted to do 12-hour shifts, but then you work 3 days one week and then 4 days the next week. But yeah, so it was...
Wow, you'd be working so many hours, and then you'd come home when your kids are waking up.
Yeah, because at the factory, I worked overnights originally. So we started like 10 or 11 at night and got off at 6 or 7 in the morning. My kids should have been up and out the door already. And I would be driving. Thank God my car has that automatic sensor so that if I would start going over the lines, I would fall asleep coming home because it was 27 miles away. And I would drift off. I would open the windows. I would turn on the radio. But I was so exhausted. It was even dangerous. And you're so tired and so busy with surviving. I started not recognizing myself. Here I had been this person working in dawah, this person publishing Islamic books, this person who was very regular about all of my ibadah. And I just started seeing it was wearing on my soul. For that first year of working the overnight shift, I would come home exhausted. I would always fall asleep. But 4 hours later, my body never, ever, ever adjusted to sleeping in the day, even though my room was completely blacked out. But for over a year, I literally slept 4 hours a day. And your body just isn't meant to do that. And I think I just reached a point of sheer exhaustion. And I remember standing, or more like I was envisioning myself just standing, looking out the window, and literally feeling like I was sliding down that proverbial rope of Allah. And like I was at the bottom and holding on for dear life. Alhamdulillah that I never stopped praying. I never took off my hijab. I never stopped fasting. I did all the requirements, but I still felt like my heart in many ways was empty. There was no time to go to the masjid or to the halakas or to Like my life was just so different. It was survival mode. And it affected my Iman greatly. And I felt almost like hypocritical. I don't mean that I was a hypocrite in that I didn't believe or that I was against Islam anyway. But I felt like I had been one kind of person, and now I was almost like I didn't recognize myself, like I was somebody else. I was ashamed because I felt like, how can Allah be pleased with me when I'm just doing the bare minimum. And I kept telling myself, I know Allah. I know my deen. So why am I struggling? Shaitan. And I thought that because I was a firm, strong, practicing Muslim, that Shaitan could never get to me this intensely. And it almost came to me as a shock, like, how can I have been such a practicing Muslim and now be struggling so greatly with my Iman? Like, I believed wholeheartedly, but I was just wandering blindly at the same time. And I would tell myself, like, this is why you have to keep going back to the sources and be around good people and go to the halaqas or sit down with your book or listen to the podcast or whatever it is, we can't, because once you let one thing slide, then all the other things start disappearing too. And it's not to say that Allah, He's always there for Tawbah, right? We can never, if we slide, we can never let it get us down to the point that we don't think that we can get back. And we also know that Iman goes up and down. But for me, it was like such a drop down a mountain. It wasn't little baby hills. Mm-mm. It felt like sliding down a mountain.
The troubles for AJ didn't end there. Although things were looking on the up and up again, especially after she finally got her new apartment that fall, her marriage fell apart. AJ and the father of her children decided to go their separate ways, and for the first time in a long time, she was completely in this thing called life alone. But AJ wasn't the type to believe in doing life alone, okay? AJ wasn't that type of girl. AJ was a hopeless romantic, and so AJ met a guy online that was like no other man she had ever met before. He really sparked that joy back into her life after a long slumber of life's ebbs and flows. He would read Islamic books with her, go hiking with her, show her the kind of love she's always prayed for. To be honest, but it sounds like what we all prayed for. The problem was, he lived in another state, which meant that she had to pack up once again and take a leap on love.
So we had gotten married before I moved. Like, I had gone down there, we had gotten married, I came back. And, the whole time I was looking for a job. I didn't want to go till I had a job there. Right. And then at one point, I actually went to visit and rented an apartment there, thinking that would be easier for potential employers to see that I'm established there. Right. So that's what I did. But so when we had first gotten married, he said that he was living with a brother and his family. And, like if I sent things in the mail, it would send him to this address. And I remember him saying, don't put your return address on the package. And I said, why? He said, I just don't want anybody in my business. I'm living in other people's houses. I don't want them in my business. And so even though it struck me as kind of weird, I didn't see it as a red flag. It should have been a red flag.
Okay, so picture this. Close your eyes. On the morning of the first day of the rest of their lives, AJ's Prince Charming drives down in his carriage to pick up his princess, to move across the states to finally be with each other, because long distance just wasn't cutting it for them. And how could it for these star-crossed lovers? Right? But wait. On the day of their move, AJ started to notice something. I'm going to just say it. AJ started to see massive, there's danger here, do not look away, bloody bright red flags.
there were red flags from the very beginning. And it's not that I was choosing them to ignore them. If I go back now, I see that that's what it was. Like the evening that I left Minnesota, packed up the U-Haul to go. And my family literally lived 8 blocks away. And he told me, we don't have time to go say goodbye to them.
Wow.
He wouldn't let me bring my microwave. He wouldn't let me bring my weights that were my dad's. He wouldn't let me bring a cooler that belonged to my dad. Like, he was stripping me and it didn't make any sense. I'm like, you have enough stuff. It's too full. You don't need to bring anything else. And I'm thinking, what? Here I am. I had given up my apartment. I had given up my job. So what can I do in this moment? And he said, well, if you really want to go see your family, then just catch up with me. And I'm like, I don't even know. I'm traveling across the country. How am I going to just catch up with you?
Wow.
And so I'm standing there going, part of myself is saying, you shouldn't be going. And the other part is saying, how can you not go? All of your stuff is packed up and, he must just be tired, And so you want your marriage, you're newlyweds, you want your marriage to be good. And so you just ignore things. If you see that somebody's getting upset, you don't want to rock the boat. But literally the whole trip down there, he tortured me psychologically. He made me stop on the side of the highway at one point and just was screaming at me for no reason. He told me that he said, you're tired. You can't drive straight through, but I can because I road trip a lot. And he forced me to stay by myself on the side of the road and told me that I couldn't come, right? And I'm thinking, what kind of husband does that?
What do you mean you couldn't come? What does that mean, leaving you on the side of the road? I don't understand.
He said it wasn't, he was trying to tell me it wasn't safe for me to keep driving because, It's a long trip. And this was probably the 15-hour mark or 14-hour mark. And he just said, I worry about you driving. Because, he was driving a van that I had purchased with the U-Haul on the back. And I was driving my car. And so he was trying to say that it was for my safety. And I'm thinking, but you can't just leave me here on the side of the road.
So I don't understand. Did he? I don't get it, Abdillahi. Was he gonna let you stay there, sleep there in your car?
He told me I had to stay there and sleep.
And he was gonna go.
Yeah. So of course this is a major red flag, and I'm thinking, what is going on with him? And now I'm halfway across the country. I had already rented the apartment.
But this is the first time you guys are moving in. Like you're packing up, you're going. Like this is where you guys are gonna begin your chapter, and this is how he starts the chapter. That's insane. And what's crazy? You probably felt like, am I overthinking this? Maybe he doesn't, mean it that way. Because you when you go through something, the reality of what you're seeing, you almost cannot accept, because it would just be too much to accept feeling wise.
Yeah, it's like a shock.
Yeah, it's a shock. And it's like almost survival as well. It's like if you let those feelings of, I think I'm making the greatest mistake of my life right now, you couldn't handle that in that moment. So what you do instead is you tell yourself, okay, you try to make excuses.
When somebody just said, I'm sorry, I was having an awful day, let me make it up to you, you just, you have a hope that, because there seemed to be, so I've been talking about all the negative things, right? But there was also this other side that seemed to be sincere and, playful and fun. And I thought, was he struggling at work or whatever it might be, like, just give him some time, do some dawah, figure, it's a new relationship. Sometimes you got to work out, you got to get to know somebody better. Whatever was going through my head. I guess I wanted it to work, and I thought I could make it work.
Pause. I know. The story is getting so good. But wait, I have a message for you that you're going to want to hear, okay? Have you been looking for an opportunity to reconnect your faith by building a relationship with the Quran, or even learning Quranic Arabic, or even getting your questions answered about different rulings? Well, let me tell you. The Ribat Academic Institute is an online program that provides traditional Islamic education for women by women. Yes, you heard me right. Islamic education for women by women. Yes, all the courses are taught by female scholars. Allah Mubarak. You have a choice from over 50 courses ranging from Sirah to Tajweed to Fiqh and Hadith. You can even take classes like the 99 Names of Allah or Purifying the Heart or the reflections from the Quran and the lessons from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, as well as a mentorship matters program on how to guide and support and help others. Ribat's online classes have been reconnecting Muslim women from all around the world with their faith and helping them reclaim their traditionally held leadership roles in Islamic scholarship, mentorship, and community care. All classes are held live online and recordings are posted after class. And the courses, guys, the courses are affordable. They're not expensive at all. They also provide country discounts and scholarships are available. Scholarships are available, so there's no reason why you shouldn't sign up. So if you're interested, visit Rabata, that's rabata.info/TDS and register today. AJ settled into life. She starts work, moves into the house that she got with her man, right? Classic happily ever after. No, AJ's fairy tale quickly turned into a complete nightmare. What AJ thought was a bad day turned out to be a pattern of violence throughout their relationship. And on one terrifying night, AJ finds herself sitting on the bed and her husband standing over her with a bat.
I was actually sitting on a mattress on the floor. He had picked up a bat and literally said to me, I could beat you bloody and leave you here to die and nobody would ever know.
SubhanAllah.
So that put the fear in me. You know, I said, this could be it. This could be the end of my time. And I just stood up in his face, afraid, so afraid. But I said, if that's what you're going to do, I said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, if that's what you're going to do, you know who you're going to answer to. Wow. And I know I was taking a risk doing that because it could have aggravated him more. Thankfully, by Allah's mercy, he backed off. But that wasn't the day I left. That's the day I knew I had to leave. But you have to remember that I left my home. I only had, some personal effects with me. I had some kitchen things, pots, pans, whatever. And in my mind, all I could think of was, I have to find a way to escape this apartment, but I need to take my stuff with me. I have nothing in life except these, boxes of stuff. I have nothing, and I'd have to start over with nothing.
So things started to get really bad for AJ, okay? She started to notice odd things would happen. That he would disappear. Like he would legit disappear, and some nights he wouldn't even come home to sleep. One day, AJ just had enough. Remember that address he had her sending packages to? She had a nagging feeling that it was more than just strangers he stayed with. And so she decided to investigate further.
Who gets married and then their husband always has excuses of why they're not around and they take off for a few days or, just when you start hearing these excuses, things just don't add up. But I knew that address and I actually sent somebody to the house, because here I am working, but I knew somebody who had an opportunity during the day to drive by. And I asked her, drive by and tell me what you see. And my van was there and, she recorded it. And then I had a friend who actually started putting pieces together and searched for the address and found who the owner was. And it was, I knew the name of the wife. I just, but I was lied to. They were still married, not divorced.
When AJ's co-worker confirmed that her car was indeed in the driveway, AJ decided to check it out herself on that night, where he was supposedly working late. And the car The car, just like our coworker reported, was parked again in that driveway. That's when AJ, in an impulsive reaction, decided to confront him when he got home that morning. And when I tell you, things hit the fan, things hit the fan.
I confronted him and I said, I went over to her house. My vehicle was there. Like, he was driving a van that I had purchased. I mean, I was so stressed out at this point because I was in fear. I didn't know how I was going to get away. All I wanted to do was go get a pickup and, put my stuff in it and put it in storage and go find a place to live, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I was always so afraid of him showing up and being alone. And I was actually in the living room where the door exited the apartment because I knew I was going to have to run. So I ran and he was screaming at me. And I got in my car and I called my boss because she actually turned out to be a really cool lady and she knew what was going on. And I told her, you need to call the police. I can't even call the police. I want you to record this conversation. Because he was just screaming. I mean, he was enraged. And I was so afraid. And, the police came and my boss actually called. I was working in a school. She called the principal of the school and said, we need to get AJ out of here. And so they came. Her husband came. So we had 3 vehicles and we just packed up. And he ran, he left when the police came. Not only that, they ended up calling because we had nowhere to take my stuff. So they actually called the district office. So first of all, this was COVID times, right? So the school was pretty much empty. And they actually called the district, like the mental health services or something like that. And they just said, can we please bring her stuff and put it in a storage room in the school? I mean, because that's not protocol. They don't usually allow somebody to do a favor like that. It was a crisis, and see, the thing is that he was following us in the car, in this truck that he was driving. And so we called the police because we were like, he's stalking us. We didn't want him to know where we were going. And so we called the police, and when the police came, then he broke off from, the 3 vehicles. And so the police pulled him over and he, said the junk that he said, like that was just his hangout house. And he admitted to them that he was married and lived somewhere else. And I don't know what he told them about me. So then, of course, the police came to interview me and they wouldn't do anything about it because he hadn't actually harmed me. And the janitor happened to be the only one at school at that time. And so the janitor saw everything and I just approached him and I said, just please promise me that you didn't see any of this. Don't tell anybody. And that guy was just so, he walked me out to the parking lot every single day after that, after I left. He said he's a big cockroach. That was his description. So the janitor kind of became my protector. He wouldn't let me walk out to my car because he was afraid that he could be stalking me. And I literally was watching my rearview mirror everywhere I went, not knowing if him or, his wife or wife's kids or, anybody, he could have sent anybody after me. And thankfully I knew somebody. So I actually reached out to her the first day and said, I have nowhere to go. Otherwise I'm going to be sleeping in the mountains, and so she said, one of the people in her house was going to be gone for the weekend and I could come just for the weekend. But then I had to figure out what to do after that. And amazingly, one of my coworkers, went home and told her husband, and they welcomed me to come to their house. So Allah opened a door. So I was at their house for probably 3, 4, 5 weeks. I really don't remember, I know that I was there longer than I expected to. I mean, I was relieved to have a place to put my head down. I made a lot of dua and I had a lot of conversations with Allah. Like I was talking to him in my head. Again, it was just starting over with almost nothing and just having to survive while all these emotions are going through your head. Mm-hmm. Again, it's like you have to hold on to the rope, but you're just sliding because it's so hard. Yeah. So you're going back and forth. It's like a ping pong ball, on a table, just going back and forth like, yeah, Allah, I know I need you right now. Please help me. And then there's no help coming. I'm stuck. I'm so angry. I'm so afraid. I mean, I was on the floor at night and there was like a sliding door out to a patio. And I was afraid that he would come in. And yet you're so attached, even though it's like being trauma bonded in your head, you want him to be apologetic and you want him, to let it work out because you feel alone, which is sick. Okay?
Yeah.
But in the moment, I had loved him in a way that I hadn't loved somebody else until I saw that he wasn't who I thought he was.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was, and then you start, doubting yourself, like what is happening in my life? What now? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? I could barely think straight. And I was so traumatized. Even though I knew I was safe, I didn't feel safe because in my mind, I was so afraid. And this is somebody that loved to talk about the religion. We would literally read, he'd be at work and I'd be on the phone with him for hours. We'd be reading Islamic books together. It was a load of quote unquote fun. We went hiking and road trips and, I was just like, I can't believe that Allah blessed me with a man like this in the beginning. Right? But it was all a front. But after I moved down there, he couldn't keep up the secret anymore.
Subhanallah. It must have been like, and that was the first time you had, got back on a horse and finding love. And when you did, it just was nothing like what you imagined.
I felt like I was losing my mind because I started seeing the red flags, right? I started seeing the controlling, abusive behavior. And you just think to yourself, like, what is this? You start thinking you're crazy. Mm-hmm. Like, why? I always wondered, why did abused women stay with their abusers? I could never understand that. But you are so trapped, especially because I had no family there. I only knew a few people. I had really nowhere to go. I didn't know that Allah was going to open a door and that my coworker, there was really only two people who knew in the school. My immediate boss and the one coworker that we just clicked, and I entrusted her and she knew what was going on. The one who offered me her home. But I really was so alone in the world. I didn't know where to go. I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't even really know the city yet. I didn't know my way around. And all I could think of is, I can't walk out of here with just the clothes on my back. At least, how am I going to just replace the few things that I do have?
Imagine how much more things would have been difficult for AJ had she had not had the people to help her. When you really deep her situation, you can't help but marvel at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reality is, her husband was her only family. In a city she had never lived in before, barely knowing its people, barely even know how to get around the city. And her husband, he was her wali, he was her protector. He was supposed to be a source of rahmah and love. But look, he turned on her, and she had no one. But look how Allah sent help. Through her boss, through her friend, her co-worker, even a janitor. Because the truth is, your wali can abandon you. But al-wali, the helper, would never abandon you. And if you know who al-wali is, you know he's also the disposer of affairs. And let me tell you how he handled hers in the best way. One day, AJ gets a call from an old boss back in Minnesota to offer her a job, offering her the same position with higher pay. But going back to Minnesota meant she had to choose homelessness again, because what's there? She left everything. There's nothing there for her. And although it was difficult, AJ prayed that Allah would see her through.
I never in my life imagined that in my 50s, I would be homeless. Allah, again, was merciful that a person opened their door to me. You know, somebody I knew, again, but not super well. But enough that they knew that I didn't have anywhere to go. And said, until you get on your feet, you can stay here. So I'm, in this woman's basement going, I got to make a move. I can't let this time keep going. Again, it was only supposed to probably be a few weeks and turned into, probably 3-4 months. I don't remember how long. Had to have been at least 3. I just said to myself one day, I wonder if I'd qualify for a house loan. Never really believing in my soul that I would. So I applied on a Friday to an Islamic mortgage company. I got the answer the same day. Okay, yeah, you would apply. You would qualify for whatever amount of money. I met a realtor on Saturday. Spent the whole day Saturday afternoon going through the listings. Picked out 4 places to go visit on Sunday with her. And the 3 that were at the top of my list, when I actually got to the properties, they were no way for whatever reason. And so the 4th house was a house that I really wasn't that interested in it because it was a little bit bigger than what I wanted, but it was still within the price range. And I walked into the house. I got halfway through it. I turned around. My sister was with me, and I said, "This is my house." Now, the market at the time was kind of a hot market, right? And the realtor told me that she actually stayed after we left to see how many people came to tour it. She said, "There's a lot of interest in this house, and if you want to get it, you need to offer more than the listing." And I said, "I can't. It is at the very top of my budget. And if it's meant for me, I'll get it. And if it's not, I won't. But I will not offer a penny more because I can barely offer what it is." I made the offer. They accepted it on Monday.
Allahu Akbar.
I got a house in like 3 days.
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillah. Because it was already yours, Amatallah. It was already yours.
So, I mean, after hardship comes ease. Verily, after hardship comes ease.
Inna ma'al usri yusra, wallahi.
I never thought I'd be a homeowner. I mean, it was a huge stretch. But I just needed that, the feeling of having my own place where nobody could tell me what to do, where,
Wow, subhanAllah.
Yeah. I mean, at this age, my parents they could have retired, right? I never imagined in my life that I would be homeless and in such chaos and have to start over, with no savings, nothing. But subhanAllah, Allah He opens those doors. And, that ayah, it says the hardship is 1 and the ease is 2.
Mm-hmm.
It's doubled. So, I mean, this was completely unexpected. I really never, ever, ever dreamed that I'd be a homeowner. Like how? How do you go from being homeless to being a homeowner? But it just...
I don't know. That's insane. Especially because you started so many times. You started so many times. And for someone to experience that at your age, you know what I'm saying, is like... Some people would say like, oh, it's a write-off. Like you're going to struggle like this for the rest of your life, But subhanAllah, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that takes us from nowhere to somewhere. Does that make sense? It's Allah that takes us to here. It's with His, because it's easy for Allah. All of this stuff is so easy for Allah.
The thing is, too, though, we can't think that we can't have a false security. I mean, there's a sense of security having your own place, but I was very comfortable when I lived in Saudi Arabia. Yeah. And then to come back here and so when I moved in my house, I had no money for furniture, but there was an organization for women who had been abused. And so they brought me furniture. So nothing in my house matches. It's all used. It's all whatever. But I'm so grateful. And you kind of feel, again, you feel like Oh my God, like I hate asking anybody for anything. I never want to feel indebted to another human being, but you have to get over that because Allah provides.
Wow, subhanAllah. To see your story in like full from beginning to end, it reminds me, it's like, subhanAllah, we're going to be tested until the day we meet Allah, like forever. You might do something really great, then you'll go through another difficult moment, then you'll be fine again, then you'll go through a difficult moment, then you'll be fine again, and then you go through another thing again. It's like, that's what this life is about, is that we're going to be tested, but how many of us are going to return back?
Right. And I also want to say, for people that really have slid, like really far, it doesn't matter. It's past. What matters is now and in the future. So if you've quit praying, if you've started using intoxicants, if you've slept with somebody you shouldn't have slept with, whatever it is, no matter, don't think that I can't repent, because you can. And even if you can't just give up some of the bad things you're doing, always, always pray. And you may feel hypocritical in doing that, but that's the way that you will turn back to Allah. I remember, so let's go back to the sister whose husband, Abu Bilal, that passed away. She was a scholar as well. And she always told her children that, especially as they grew up and went off to college in other countries and knew the fitna and all of that. And she just told them, it doesn't matter if you struggle and face fitna, but never, ever, ever give up your salah. That's really what kept me going. Even like I said, I felt like I was losing my faith, but I never gave up the basic principles. Just never give up the basic principles. You can't expect yourself to change overnight. Shaitan's happy. He got you to go do those things. But this is the way to fight him. Get back to the salah.
The part that fascinates me about Amatullah Bentley's story is that she did this incredible thing. She had translated the Quran that we all know and love, her translations, the work that she did with Muhammad and Mary Kennedy. And the daunting part about it is that you just think, okay, that's the story, right? When we interviewed Amatullah Bentley, I thought that was the story. I think that was it. She did it, like, she told her experience. But to hear about her afterlife, coming back to America, struggling to make ends meet, dealing with the fear of homelessness while also being a single mom. I'm just like thinking, how could a person who did something like this, so big and so beneficial to the ummah, could be the same person that was struggling like that? But like, it just blew my mind. Like, the contrast of it, I was like, oh my God, subhanAllah, like our life is a lot longer than we imagine. You might do something really big. Allah might, give you an opportunity to do something so massive. But it's like, your journey doesn't end there. Your journey ends when you die. Like, it's continuously going. Allah is always going to test you. Like, you're going to do something, and the thing that you did, he's going to test you with. And then you're going to be tested again. You're going to be tested again. And you might be 70 and you've done like 1 million things. You've overcome 1 million things. And it's just like, wow, like all of these small moments are just a short part of her life. It's just a small chapter of her life. And it's like, it also makes me reflect on the beauty of like, what is her whole story going to look like before Allah? What else is Amatullah Bentley going to do? Not even, what's interesting? What if, to us, she did such a huge thing for the ummah, but imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves her for something else more. Like, it makes you reflect on like, maybe it was the way that she held onto the rope of Allah that is so large in the sight of Allah. Maybe it was those moments where she was just trying to provide for her family, even though she just kept sleeping in her car wherever she could, but still holding tight to her deen is what Allah loved most. In my eyes, I'm like, wow, I was looking at more of a bit of a, like, what is the biggest thing she did? But, sometimes I think the smallest things in life might mean more to Allah, because it shows how devoted we were when things were bad. You know what I'm saying? Abdillahi Bentley's, when she translated the Quran, things were up for her then. But like, it's really what attracted me to looking at her and defined her as a person was when things were bad, who was she? Who was she when she was down bad? Who was she when no one checked for her? Who was she when she's just driving hours back and forth by herself to provide for her children? Who was she then? When she was facing the fear of homelessness in the face, who was she then? That really just makes me look at her and just say, wow. I want to be that kind of Muslim. That no matter how large the things I do, or what other people think of me, forget about what I do, what other people think of me, the kind of person I am. I hope that the moments that nobody sees and only Allah knows is what counts the most. Like, that's what really counts, yo. It's the stuff that people don't know, man. Allah, it's the stuff that people don't know. Allah, I'm getting chills thinking about it, but it really is the stuff that people don't know, man. It's those moments where you're crying alone and you're pleading with Allah, or you're struggling. It's just people just know about it, and the only person that knows is Allah. And who you are in those moments when nobody's looking, it's the most powerful. This episode is brought to you by Beautiful Light Studios. I want to give a shout out to producer Scekomar, assistant producers Nima, Harun, and Khweya Bezeid, graphic designer for the one and only Wasima Farah, and to our marketing extraordinary Sawsan Abdillahi. Thank you, sis. I'll see you guys next week in your ears, in your speakers, telling you a good story. Wait a minute. I got news for y'all. Don't hang up. Don't leave me. Just 1 second. Give me 1 minute. I have incredible news. I would like to announce that the Digital Sisterhood podcast, has been nominated for a Shorty Award in the Arts and Culture category, This is a big deal. This is such a big deal. Congratulations, everyone, to Beautiful Light Studios, to the Digital Sisterhood team, to you, the listeners. Congratulations. This is yours as well. This is a big W. We have become a finalist. I think there's 6 people who've been moved to the next round, finals, in the final round, and now the jury's going to vote who wins the category. Now, if you don't know what a Shorty Awards is, it's basically like the MTV Awards podcasting, maybe even Oscars. I don't know, but it's a big deal. And I don't know how many Muslim podcast, unapologetic Muslim podcast, Muslim women of color podcast has ever won an award, never mind like been nominated. Like, I don't know. We're actually going to do our research, but I've never heard of it. So if there is somebody out there that won, then big toot, but this is a big deal too for us, alhamdulillah. And I'm so excited to just even be nominated. This is so insane to me, because it's only just more clear how big TDS is becoming, how massive we're becoming, how mainstream we're becoming. And literally all we talk about is Allah, du'as, vibes. Like, we just, our faith are just so unapologetically and just without filter. And here we are, like, competing with the Game of Thrones podcast, competing with, other podcasts in big productions like Warner Bros., Apple Originals, Audibles. Are you kidding me? Our Mesquite podcast is going neck and neck with the Game of Thrones podcast. First of all, this is insane. It's insane. You should all be proud of yourselves. If you're listening, you deserve a tap on your back for listening and for being attentive and for engaging, bro. Like, alhamdulillah, wallahi, Allah truly deserves all praise. And the way that, like, this podcast, Allah Mubarak, is just reaching new levels that no other podcast has ever done before is truly something to reflect and marvel at. Wallahi, Allah deserves all praise. I want to invite you guys to vote for us. We also have the opportunity of winning an award. It's called the Audience Honoree Award. Not the actual award winning for the category. The juries have to judge for that. But we do have an opportunity to win an award as an audience impact award, like how, engage our audience is. So if you guys can get to vote for us, and I guess depending on who has the most votes wins. And I know all, like, million of you guys, okay? I don't even know how many at this point, how many listeners there are. There are so many. If every single one of you guys voted, we would literally just blow the roof off the house. You know, like literally, it would shock everyone. And I want to invite you guys to vote for us. If you go to our link tree, okay, if you go to our Instagram, go to our link tree, or even in a if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, if you go into the description, we'll have the link there for you guys to vote for us. Or you can go on our Instagram, check our link tree. It's the first link that you see that says vote for us. You can vote for us as many times as you would like. We need the votes in by April 26th, okay? Go crazy. Go get your families to vote. Get everybody to vote because, wow, TDS, yes, it needs to be loud and proud. Everybody needs to know we are unapologetically Muslim and we out here big, okay? So go ahead and vote. Get your mama to vote. Get your auntie to vote. Get your neighbor to vote. Get everybody to vote. Everybody has to come out, inshallah, and vote for the culture. Vote for the culture because it's iconic, man. It's iconic. And again, congratulations to Beautiful Lighthouse, Beautiful Light Studios, the Digital Story team, and to you, the listeners. Y'all did this. Allah did this. Alhamdulillah. And he deserves all praise. So go ahead and vote. And let's see. Alhamdulillah. Let's see, inshallah. Hopefully we can beat Games of Thrones. Hopefully, inshallah. But anyways, Jazakallah khair, guys. Assalamu alaikum. Love you.